Hey guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to be going over my 2024 bingo card. On Reddit, there is a subreddit fantasy that does a bingo board every year to promote reading of fantasy books that might be outside of your genre. The bingo board goes from April of any given year to March of the next year. So it is March of 2025, so we're going over the bingo board for 2024. So the bingo board is filled with a bunch of squares, and as you read throughout the year, you mark off your squares. Well, I did not just hit bingo, I filled out my entire board, which I am very, very proud of. There are a couple of rules for the fantasy bingo board. One, all of the books that you read do have to be fantastical in some way. They can be fantasy, sci-fi, horror, whatever it is, but as long as there is a fantastical element. It can't be like a contemporary romance because it is a fantasy reading challenge. Additionally, when you are reading your books, you cannot read multiple books from the same author. It's one book per square per author. So if you wanted to complete a whole series and fill out all the squares, it doesn't count. Just one book from that series counts because you can only have one author. These books all have to be books that are read between April of 2024, in this case, to March of 2025. You can't use any books that were read outside of that. And if you do want to reread, only one reread is allowed. I did not take my reread in this instance. I actually just read the sequel for one that would have counted, and that's how I kind of got around it. And then last but not least, you do have to follow the prompts, and you cannot use one book for multiple prompts. So it does have to be one book per square. So to start off the bingo board, the first square on it is book that is first in a series. So that one was kind of easy. There's a lot of new series that are coming out. I had a lot of options that could have gone in this square, like The Flame and the Dagger and Curious Tides and a whole bunch of other ones, but I decided to go with Spark of the Everflame. So Spark of the Everflame by Penn is a fantasy romance series. It's set in an alternative world where the humans and the Fae equivalent do not live equally. The humans are basically considered less than, and there is a shadow daddy and all of that kind of fun stuff. So this is the book that I decided to go with for that square. The next square on the board is alliterative title. So alliterative title is basically a title of a book that has multiple words in the title that share the same first letter. So for that one, it was kind of hard to find. I ended up going with The Secret Service of Tea and Treason. So this is actually a fantastical rom-com. It's super cute. It's set I would say perhaps Regency time, maybe not, but basically it's a world where women are either witches or pirates, and the pirates fly houses and the witches fly on brooms, and they have a competition, and the government is involved, and there's a secret service, and it's just super entertaining. I highly recommend the series if you've never heard of it. Again, it's like a rom-com, but more Regency in time period, and absolutely adorable, super funny, and there are fantastical elements to it. So the next square we have is Under the Surface. So Under the Surface is basically a book where some part of the storyline is under the surface or under the water. I had a couple that I could have went with for this, but what I ended up going with is The Warm Hands of Ghosts. So The Warm Hands of Ghosts is actually a World War I historical fantasy. It is about a woman who is searching for her brother. She joins up as an army nurse to go over to Europe during World War I to look for her brother because ghosts are telling her that he's not dead and he needs her to save him. So the reason I went with this for Under the Surface is because initially the quest to search for her brother begins when her brother is blown up by a shell and is trapped inside of a pillbox buried underground with another soldier, a German soldier, and they need to escape to survive. So I went with that for this one. The next square that I have is criminals. Now, I read a lot of fantasy, and there were a lot of options for this. A lot of options where someone in the book is a criminal. But I ended up going with When the Moon Hatched. Hatched. So When the Moon Hatched is a fantasy romance. There are dragons, there's an assassin, there is a guy, if I remember correctly, he's like, yeah, a king. There is a king, an assassin, there's dragons. The main female character is an assassin. She is caught and arrested and put in prison. That's when the king stumbles upon her, sees her, recognizes her, and then breaks her out. And then all of the romance and dragons and magic ensues. But criminal, it had to be someone who is a criminal, a thief, a assassin, fraud, heists, anything like that. So it worked. She's an assassin. She gets caught. She goes to jail. Makes her a criminal. The next square was dreams. And there was a lot of books that I could have picked for this. Characters that have dreams, but that experience dreams inside. I mean, most of them are already, I found another square for most of them though. But so the one that I went with is actually a Sorcery of Thorns. So this is a fantasy, a YA fantasy. The main female character is she's like a warrior nun who's entrusted with the protection of books, but the books come alive. They come alive, they have personalities. Sometimes they want to eat you, sometimes they scream. It's a whole bunch of other stuff. So there's dangerous books and she's the guardian of those books. She ends up with a sorcerer. And this sorcerer, he's young and she's initially afraid of him, but they end up working together to save the day, that sort of a thing. But he does have dreams. He has nightmares, and those nightmares come to fruition in his house. So everybody knows when he's having these nightmares because his house starts growing vines or snowing or doing something crazy. So I ended up going with Sorcery of Thorns for that one. The next row, we have Entitled Animals. So Entitled Animals is going to be a book title that has an animal name in the title. That was actually really hard for me to find. Like really, really hard for me to find. But I was successful, obviously. And I read The Wren and the Holly Library. So the Wren in this case is a nickname for the main character. This book follows a thief who was sent into a mysterious manor to steal something. When she is caught by the very strange sorcerer who lives inside. He then recruits her to help him steal something from a vault in a well-guarded place. The Wren represents a real Wren, but his nickname for her is Wren in this because, well, I can't tell you, otherwise I would spoil it. But Wren and the Holly Library, it was good. I liked it. The next one was actually really hard for me to find. So the next square is Bard. So for the Bard category, you basically had to find a bard, a musician, a poet, or a storyteller. That wasn't that easy to find, surprisingly enough. So I had a couple of options, a couple of ideas. Right. I was thinking The Savage Song by V. Schwab. I started it. I just couldn't get into it. I was doing maybe A Teller of Small Fortunes because one of the side characters is a poet. And I was like, hey, maybe that would work. But then I just, on a whim, wanted to read all of our Demise. And I realized that my favorite character, Alistair Lowe, counts as a bard. He is a storyteller. He loves to tell creepy monster stories. So I went for it. So All of Our Demise is a sequel to All of Us Villains. It is basically like Hunger Games, but if all of the contestants were rich, powerful kids who were in a battle to the death for magic, who had magical powers. It's awesome. I love this series. It's absolutely amazing. And the fact that I got to use it on the bingo board made me super happy. Thank you, Alistair. We love you, because the Bard one was one of my hardest ones to figure out. Next on the list, we have Prologue and Epilogue. So Prologue and Epilogue is easy to find. I had a few that would have been great, but I either wanted to use them for other squares, or I had already used the author in another place, so I couldn't use it twice. It was just a hot mess. So I ended up going with Curious Tides. This is another one that I could have used for like Under the Surface or a couple other ones, to be honest with you. So there's an epilogue and a prologue. This is also a dark academia, so it's like a lot of things. But the main characters, it's two main characters. It's a dual perspective. It's set at a magical university where the students learn to better their moon-given powers. So the magic system is based off of the moon cycles. Each moon cycle has a different house, and powers are associated with that. In this story, the female main character follows her roommate into caves They're performing a ritual. Everybody dies except for her. They don't make it out of the cave. Everybody dies except for her. She makes it back, and now they're trying to figure out where those kids went, because only a few of them washed up on shore. The rest of them, their bodies have never been found. So it's the female main character. What's her name again? Emery. So Emery, and then Baz, who is the brother of her best friend. They go searching for answers together. So obviously, epilogue and prologue, self-explanatory, wasn't much of the plot, it's just the way it's written, and this one fulfilled that prompt. The next prompt was a self or indie published book, and I went with the Book of Azrael. Now, generally speaking, I do not read a lot of self or indie published books, but if I do read them or enjoy them, they end up getting traditionally published anyways, so do they really count at this point? But I picked this one up, I read it, I hated it. I did not like it at all. This is a romantasy. It is a modern fantasy slash, it's weird to describe. It's set in the modern day, but you don't realize it's the modern day. It's very confusing. Well, it's not that you don't realize. It's set in the modern day, but it's confusing as to how it's the modern day, because some of the setting is very not modern day and some of it is very modern day. Like, what one would assume like the underground is like not modern, but it's a weirdly written book. And then there's a character who's a monster of some sort. And then there are gods. And then there's a god who comes down and they're in the search for the Book of Azrael. I didn't like it. I thought it was poorly written, confusing, not much substance. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it whatsoever. So I read it. It counts for the board, but I didn't like it. So there we go. Can't all be winners. The last book on this line is Romantasy. That was easy to fulfill. Half of my library is Romantasy. Maybe not half. Well, 33% of my library is Romantasy. So for that one, I picked up Quicksilver by Callie Hart. So Quicksilver is a Romantasy. It follows a girl. She's a thief. There's a lot of similarities in the books that I read, okay? She's a thief and she steals something, the wrong thing. She ends up getting taken to the queen for punishment, queen of her realm. She lives in a world, it's a desert world. It's divided into classes. Obviously, she is part of the lower class. The way they oppress people is through water. Her lower class barely gets a cup of water to survive a day. So they're struggling and people are dying of famine and death and dehydration and all of that kind of stuff. But anyways, when she's taken to the queen, she used to be executed. Madness happens. She's fighting for her life. She ends up pulling a sword, and after she pulls that sword, this guy comes out of a portal and saves her and takes her back to his world, which is another realm. It is actually really good. Like, I really, really enjoyed this book. It's one of those, it was self-published at one point, but this is traditionally published. It was picked up by a traditional publisher. And it is, if you're looking for like that romantasy, like itch fulfillment, this is definitely it. He's shadow wielder, dark, brooding, grumpy, sad boy. She's, smart, super capable. She can fight, all that kind of stuff. Like the characters that we love that have become so popular, and it's really good. So I highly recommend it. The next line on our bingo board is the middle line on the bingo board, okay? It starts off with Dark Academia. Now, Dark Academia, again, is another subgenre of fantasy that I am super obsessed with. So I had a lot of options for this, but the one that I ended up going with was The Temptation of Magic. So this is a Dark Academia-ish story. So there is, it follows the main character who is a monster of some kind. She is hiding. She does not want to be found. If anybody finds out that she is this type of monster, she will be recruited into a world of basically being an enforcer for the political power, I guess, whoever is in power. But she needs to find out more information. Clues were left for her by her mother, who was this type of monster, but was killed. And so she goes to a university where she is kind of hiding out, as well as searching through the clues left in the art in this art collection left by her mother to try and solve this mystery. Well, in the process, a guy who's the same kind of monster as her, who is one of those enforcers, she meets him and they work together, and she's trying to keep her secret. It's really good. I really enjoyed this one. The next one is Multiple Point of View. So obviously Multiple Point of View, it's going to be a book that contains multiple points of view. There were a lot of options for this one, but I ended up going with The Kiss of Deception. So The Kiss of Deception is a fantasy with a romantic subplot. It follows a main character who is trying to escape. She escaped with she's a princess, I think. Yeah, she is a princess who is supposed to be marrying a prince. She doesn't want to marry him, so she runs away with one of her friends. They go to a small town, and she is being followed by two men. One of them is a prince, and one of them is meant to kill her. You don't know which one is which, but she meets them, and they're both kind of into her. It's like love triangle-ish. But again, you don't know which one is the prince that is supposed to marry her and has been searching for her, or which one is the assassin who was sent to kill her. So, but it is multiple points of view. It has all three of their points of view, and it is a really good story. I'm super excited. I enjoyed it so much, but I never finished the series. So that's one of the ones that I have to finish the series on. And I own the whole thing. I own all of this series and the spin-off series, but I just need to read them. So, but this is a good one. Next is a book published in 2024. I have a lot of books that were published in 2024, but I decided to go with one of my favorite books that was published in 2024, and that would be Empire of the Damned by J. Kristoff. This is the sequel to The Empire of the Vampire. It is a high fantasy vampire story. In this world, vampires are bad. The vampires are bad. They're horrible. Like, there is no, ooh, sexy vampire. No, vampires bad. And it follows Gabriel de Leon. He is a member of a religious order called the Silver Saints. Basically, they are boys who are half vampire, half human. Generally speaking, something terrible happened to their mothers, and they were the product of this. They are recruited into this religious order where they fight the forces of darkness and the vampires. Basically, the story is told in an interview with a vampire style situation where he is being interviewed by a vampire in captivity, going back through his story, his personal life, as well as his connection to the Holy Grail. So the Holy Grail is a mythological item, kind of, that is meant to end the eternal night. The reason the vampires can roam around is because the sun has been blocked out. There's very little sunlight, so they can roam freely, and the Grail is supposed to stop that. And this is Gabriel's story of how that came to be. So really amazing series, really amazing books. I absolutely love this one. So this is, however, very deceiving. The UK edition of this is like twice as thick. They just made this one really thin, I guess, to not scare people away. But just be aware that this book is really long, okay? If you're going to pick it up, I highly recommend it. But if you're going to pick it up, these are really long books. Just be aware of that. The next square that I have is actually a character with a disability. And this would be a physical or mental disability, either one. So the book that I picked for that is actually Phantasma. So Phantasma is a darker romantic fantasy. It is going to be, I think, like Caraval, but like more, think Caraval, but like darker and with more smut. The main character of the story does suffer from OCD. So that is where the disability prompt comes into play. Basically, the main character, she goes on a quest into this magical traveling manor. Basically, it's called Phantasma, where when you complete it, if you win, you get to ask one favor for it to be completed. She goes in to try and save her family home because her mother took out a loan and she passed away, and they're about to lose their family home and they don't want to do it. Main character goes in. She can already like talk to ghosts and stuff like that. So when she goes in, she finds a ghost that she is talking to, and this ghost helps her through the tournament. There's a series of games to win, obviously. It's smutty, but it's really good. I liked it. The end was a little cheesy. It seemed like a kind of a cop-out, but the rest of the book was very, very good, and I did enjoy it apart from the very end. That was kind of, it was obvious, and it just felt kind of like the ends weren't tied up properly. It was just kind of like a convenient ending, which I didn't enjoy, but the sequel is coming out this year, and I am quite excited to read it. So the last square on that line is a book published in the 90s. That was hard for me to find because I have read all of the books that were published in the 90s that I own. I own them because I bought them in the 90s, and I've already read them. So I could have done a reread, but I tried. I didn't want to do any rereads for this challenge. I wanted to read all new stuff. So I found a book that technically was published in the 90s, and I went with that. So I read The Alchemist. Technically, The Alchemist was published originally in 1988, but that was in Portuguese. The English translation version of this book was published in 1993. So since I am reading the English translated edition, I figured that that would count. So I read The Alchemist. It is very short. It is a super, super short book. It's well known. So it was required reading for a lot of people. In the school that I taught in, it was required reading. I was never required to read this. The classes that I took did not use this for one of the required reading books. So I have never read it. This is the first time I am reading it in my life, and I hated it. I absolutely hate it. The Alchemist reads like parables, and it's very philosophical, and the message is good. The message is, chase your dreams and all that kind of stuff, but it was just too flowery, and I hated every minute of it. So we have the next row. The next square would be Orcs, Trolls, and Goblins, Oh My. And that is pretty self-explanatory. It is a book that features orcs, trolls, or goblins, oh my. The book that I ended up picking for that is actually The Teller of Small Fortunes. So I just finished this one. I had another book that I was going to go with, but then I read this one and I was like, ooh, that's like a troll, like a bridge troll. So I decided to go with this one. Teller of Small Fortunes is a cozy fantasy that features a Shin woman, basically think like Asian, who is traveling around telling small fortunes. She's trying to avoid being a part of the magical society. She just wants to kind of be free, not be a part of their group. She doesn't like the politics and all of that comes with it. Along the way of her journey, just kind of wandering around, living out on the road, she stumbles upon two men who are on a quest to find the one man's daughter. It's a found family story. It's super sweet, but really there was a troll in it. There was a scene where they were crossing a bridge and there was a troll, and this is why that was chosen. The next book is a space opera, and there is no other great space opera than that of Red Rising. But I read Red Rising. So space opera is basically a science fiction book set in space with politics or personal complications or, something like that. So it's set in space. And there's no other space opera better than Red Rising, but I had already read Red Rising. And again, I didn't want to do any rereads. So I went with the sequel, Golden Sun. Golden Sun is better than Red Rising. Anyways, this book devastated me. These are actually the Nerdy Ink covers, by the way. I got them for Valentine's Day. They're super cute. There's no other book that devastates me more than Red Rising. It is so freaking good. And this book was just like a roller coaster of emotion, and I didn't know how to feel. I still haven't gotten over this book. I finished the series, still haven't gotten over this book, just so you know. It is so amazing. But it is a space opera. There are politics. It is set entirely in space. There's a lot of warring and taking over planets and governments and espionage and betrayal and just all of that. Rebellion. It's amazing, and I highly recommend this series. It's like so freaking good. But anyways, so that was space opera. Next on the list was an author of color. I do have a lot of books that are by authors of color, and I just decided to go with one that have been sitting on my shelf for a really long time. I had this book on my shelf. I had the other book in my classroom, and I was like, you know what? I should probably read this since I have the book, multiple copies of this book, and I decided to go with Spin the Dawn. This is a Asian-inspired fantasy following a young woman who is chosen to be the tailor for the king. She has magical scissors, but she has to pretend to be her brother, basically, because women are not allowed to be tailors. So there is discussion about that, patriarchy, women's roles, that sort of thing. In this story, she does meet a dark and mysterious sorcerer, and they kind of have a thing going on, but it is a YA fantasy, so there is not like that kind of thing going on. But I absolutely love this book. Next would be Survival. So the next square is Survival. And the book that I chose for that. So I had conveniently read this book, not because I noticed the survival square, but because I was doing a buddy read with my daughter and we picked it up and it just sounded really good. And then I saw the survival and I was like, oh, well, that works for that. But that is A Door in the Dark. So basically it is a fantasy. It could technically count as dark academia because they are students in a college, but most of it is not set in the college. It is set in the wilderness. So basically there is a girl, she's going to a magical university. She's trying to get a job working for one of the like top magical families, like the elite magical families. No one's giving her the time of day. You know, on their way home from spring break, for spring break, they basically have to take an elevator down from the university because the university is a floating island in the sky. This magical elevator, something goes awry when her and a bunch of her classmates are in it, and they, instead of getting teleported to the ground, they are teleported hundreds of miles away into the wilderness, and they have to then make it back into civilization and survive along the way. There are lots of treacherous situations, animals, mountains, limited food, all of that kind of stuff, and they have to survive and make it back. So this was the perfect one for survival. Last in that line is going to be judge a book by its cover. And for that book, it is Starling House. It's basically just pick a book that you like the cover. And I love the cover of this. Now, I have 2 editions of this. I have the I have the Lumicrate and I have the Owlcrate edition. But it's just a gorgeous book. Even like the standard edition is just gorgeous. It's got the starlings. It's got the creepy house. It's got the color palette that I love. It's just beautiful. So Starling House is definitely one that I picked based on the cover. So the story is set in Kentucky. It's based in real life history with a fantastical element obviously added to it. So the story follows a young woman who is taking care of her brother. Her mother has passed away. They are low income. They basically live in a motel. She works at the Tractor Supply. If you are American, and especially in the South, you know what the Tractor Supply is. She works at the Tractor Supply, doesn't make a whole lot of money. One day she's walking to work and she walks past the Starling House, which is this beautiful manor in this small town in Kentucky that she has always been obsessed with. And outside she sees a young man who is now the new owner of the Starling House, and he asks her to come work for him, and crazy stuff happens because the house is sentient. It is alive and weird stuff is happening. So it's a really good story. Really kind of takes a left field. I'm not going to lie about it, but good story based in history. I really enjoyed it. So this was a good one, the Starling House. Then we have the last line. First square of the last line is set in a small town. So there are a lot of books that are set in small towns. But again, we needed to avoid duplicates and rereads and all of that kind of stuff. So I went with Castle of the Cursed. So Castle of the Cursed is set in a small town in Spain surrounding a castle. All of the members of the town are made up of the original families who were a part of this town, tiny little town. It is a young girl. Her parents die in a freak magical situation on a subway in New York. She's orphaned, and basically CPS, Child Protective Services, finds out that she is actually illegally in the US and is a resident of Spain. She is sent back to Spain to live with her aunt, who is the caretaker of this castle, the family castle. And just weird stuff starts happening. The castle starts doing weird things. There's this weird entity that is in the castle. The town is just strange. It was weird how her parents died to begin with. There's just a lot of mystery and a lot of strange things going on. And the main character finds out what's going on and how to kind of stop it. So it was a good book. There were some points in it that made me angry, like how dumb the characters were, but otherwise it was an extremely enjoyable book. This is an Owlcrate edition, so this is not what the original cover looks like. Most of these are special editions, to be honest with you, but I definitely enjoyed this one very much. And again, it is set in a small town, so it works. The next square is 5 short stories. The prompt is any 5 short stories or novellas. Okay. Originally, I was planning on using a book that I was reading called Just Doing My Job. It is a collection of short stories, but they are true historical short stories. It does not count. And I kind of realized that a little late. So I was like, okay, well, let me see what I can do here. And since the prompt says 5 short stories or novellas from different authors, I was like, okay, well, what novellas have I read this year? So I went through the novellas that I read this year, found 3, and then I had 2 left. So then I decided to read 2 short stories that are fantastical in nature. So the first novella that I read is Mystery of Thorn Manor by Margaret Rogerson. So this is the one exception that you can make with a duplicate author, is you can do a short story from another author. So this is the only duplicate that is here. She wrote A Sorcery of Thorns, and then this is the companion novella that goes along with it. So I read this one. Basically, it continues the 2 main character stories in their romantic plot and then gets back our favorite character, Silas. So this was a cute little novella that I read. The next novella that I read was Powerful. So this is the companion novella to Powerless. It follows a set of side characters in the Powerless series. Basically what they're doing while the main character, Peyton, is in the events of Powerless. So Powerful follows her best friend and another character basically during those events. So they're running simultaneously. So this was the next novella that I read. Another novella that I read was Spectacular by Stephanie Garber. So this is basically the Christmas special version of Caraval. So it follows all the characters from Caraval, but it is the Christmas special. So there is Christmas theme, Christmas event. It's about giving presents. There's all kinds of stuff. I love Stephanie Garber. I love the Caraval world. I love Once Upon a Broken Heart, except for Curse for True Love. That was pretty terrible. This, I liked it for what it was, but I also did not like it because it felt as though Stephanie Garber was taking the characters in a direction that they wouldn't normally be in, just to kind of fulfill a trend that is popular within reading. So Caraval is a YA fantasy with a romantic subplot sort of a situation. This went heavily in the romantasy, but in like a darker way, more adult way. It's not like what I was expecting from these characters. Not that it's completely out of character, but it just seemed a bit nonsensical for them to be acting this way. So while I did enjoy it for what it was, I didn't like it as much as I potentially could have. Then I had to read 2 short stories. So I decided to go with The Fall of the House Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. So I wanted to do The Mask of the Red Death, which I did read also just because I love it. So I read those. I read 8, technically 2 short stories from Edgar Allan Poe, but that's not the ones that I'm counting. So I read The Fall of the House of Usher and The Mask of the Red Death. They are just creepy gothic with minor fantastical elements to the story. You don't know if it's symbolism, if it's, psychological, if it's, whatever, but that's super good. I love Edgar Allan Poe. And then the other one that I read was The Minister's Black Veil by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Again, these are going to be stories that have fantastical elements to them minorly. You, again, don't know if it is real or not. Nathaniel Hawthorne has a lot of religious aspects to his writing, obviously based off of the time period that he wrote. So that was the other book that I read, The Minister's Black Veil, or short story that I read. The next square on our bingo board is going to be Eldritch Creature. So it's going to be a book that features some sort of Eldritch Creature. An Eldritch Creature is going to be like Cthulhu, like the big, scary, alternate universe monsters, gods, or, something from another plane. And that book that I picked was Your Blood, My Bones. So this book does feature Eldritch Creatures. Basically, the story follows a young girl who had a strange childhood. She remembers a house that she used to frequent. She then was taken away and never saw the people, her father or the people who resided in that house again. She goes back as an adult and finds her childhood friend locked in a basement. And then you come to find out that the childhood friend of hers that she cared about so much is actually a mortal being that is sacrificed by her family every few decades and is reborn simply to keep the Eldritch Creatures at bay. So it is a very dark and twisted story. It is really good. The ending made me cry, but it does feature Eldritch gods. So the next square is reference material. So this is going to be a book that has some sort of reference material like footnotes or a map or an index or a glossary or something like that. And I decided to go with Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I could have done this or the Maps of the Otherworld, but I decided to go with the first one, obviously. It does have reference materials. It does have footnotes in it. So as you're reading the story, there are footnotes at the bottom. Well, one, it gives the vibe because she's a scholar and she's doing research and that sort of thing, but it does have footnotes at the bottom explaining the different scholarly elements or things that they mention, or the types of fairy. They just speak about it, and then it'll be a footnote explaining academically what they're referring to. So it's really cool, and I really enjoyed this series. Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies is about a scholar. She is a woman who is traveling around the world, meeting with and exploring different places and learning about the fae folk of that area and compiling an encyclopedia of all of that information. And in this story, she runs into some kind of chaotic fae folk and solves some problems for a town, as well as finds herself stuck in some problems. So it's a really good series. It's cozy fantasy. I superly enjoy it. And then the last square is a book club book or a read along. Now I do have a lot of book club books that I have read because I am now in 2 book clubs, but I'm also doing a read along for the Catch Up Book Club, which is hosted by Becca in the Books and a few other YouTubers. So that book is actually Malice by John Gwynne. that I chose for that square. This is an epic fantasy, traditional story, good and evil sort of thing. It follows a cast of characters who believe that they are either the bright star, or the black sun, which are the avatars for basically the good side and the bad side. And it's following them on their journey. There are political factions and pieces moving around basically to set up for this ultimate god war, which is basically when good versus evil are going to fight each other to see who wins out, whether good is in control or the bad, that sort of thing. So this is the book that I picked for the square. It's super good. I highly recommend it. I was annotating it, obviously. I'm on the second book, or I finished the second book now. I'm on to the third book, and I absolutely love this series. Third book is going to get read probably in April, so it'll probably work for the next bingo board, maybe. I don't know. But that is it, guys. That is my completed bingo board. I'm super happy that I finished it. I got every square done. Some of it was a little last minute, I'll be honest with you. I'm super proud of myself for finishing the whole thing. I was a little skeptical at some points along the journey whether I was going to be able to complete it, but I totally did. And all of the books that I read were really awesome. I like the bingo board for the fact that it does make me leave my comfort zone for certain things. I'm a fantasy reader, so I love fantasy. Obviously, I read all types of fantasy, but there are some things that like I just would not have picked up if it wasn't for the bingo board, like The Alchemist or Starling House, or, you know, there's a few others. Obviously, a lot of them I just wanted to read to begin with, but there were quite a few that this challenge allowed me to seek out to fulfill these prompts. And that's what I love so much about these reading challenges, is they kind of give me some direction. They have me branch out a little bit and pick up things that might have been sitting there for forever or that I wouldn't have touched otherwise. So yeah, if you're interested in joining the fantasy bingo board for 2025, it will be coming out in the month of April. In the description box, I will have the link to the subreddit. That way you can see when it does come out, and then you can join in on the fun. Let me know down in the comments if you've read any of these books, if you've enjoyed any of them, if you're excited to do the bingo board, if you did it this year, and how far did you get? Other than that, guys, if you like this video, please don't forget to like it. Helps me with the algorithm. And don't forget to subscribe. That way you can get more crazy bookish content from me. But thanks again, guys. I'll see you next time.